Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, no matter where you are in this fine land of ours. I am so pleased that you have taken time out of your schedule to join us today. How are you doing, folks? I'm doing well, thanks for asking. My name is Darryl Praill. I'm your host. Today's topic is a fun one. It's all about the modernization of recruitment. And come on, you have to admit, this whole space is changing before our very eyes and changing dramatically. It's changing through the technology that's available to us. For example, artificial intelligence. Where was that 5 years ago? And yet today it's completely rewriting the approach. Data, big data, the ability to use that data to identify and target, both from the recruiter's point of view and the recruited's point of view, because it is a two-way street. Technology does allow both to do this. The marketing, how you actually promote yourself as an employer, how you promote yourself as a prospective employee, the whole essence of everything about recruitment has dramatically shifted. And ladies and gentlemen, we are just getting started. Today's show is about the modernization of recruitment. I have got a wonderful cast of characters to talk about that whole issue. Before we get there, though, let's take a few seconds to talk about some ground rules, some housekeeping. You'll see in the wonderful slide in front of you, which, by the way, has fantastic graphic design. Don't you agree? I love this. Everybody here is in listen-only mode, all right? So you can hear us, but we can't hear you. So don't take offense to that. That's just how we keep the noise down to a minimum. But we do want to hear from you, and there's a couple ways you can do that. Number one, how you can do that is physically by tweeting any questions or comments you may have to @Keynote Group. We're watching it. And in fact, not only are we watching it, if you're here live, we're live tweeting it. So if you have to leave partway through because you have another meeting, but you're just engrossed in today's conversation, get your Twitter out, @Keynote Group. Follow us. Follow the conversation. That's a wonderful way. But with that said, most people prefer the more tried and true way of actually submitting questions. You can do that in your control panel under a section that says questions. I know, it's cryptic. Type it in there, send it to us, we'll get it. We're going to answer your questions at the end of the key content. That's our way of making sure you stick around. But the best part is that is honestly the most dynamic part of every webinar, because the questions are real, they're live, we don't know what's coming in, and it's fantastic when you listen to the panelists as they stammer and stutter on how to respond to them. So that's like, free entertainment. You can't go wrong with that. So those are the ground rules. I did mention I was joined by a cast of characters, and I truly am. First up, the Chief Executive Officer of Keynote Search. If you've attended our webinars before, then you know he's a wonderful and somewhat intelligent individual. James Baker, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's probably the nicest thing you've ever said about me.
It is absolutely. I can declare the nicest thing I've ever said about you. And it killed me saying that, but it's true. You're actually kind of smart. And you can reach James. The email address is right there. And we're going to bring all of these email addresses back in the Q&A section. So if you want to email any of these individuals for any reason, you can. So that's James. He's going to be a subject matter expert today, but he's not alone. Okay, I studied hard on this name. Let's see how I do. Next up, from Calian, the recruitment manager, Igor Radojevic. Was I even remotely close, Igor?
Great job on the phonetics. We worked for about 5 minutes on it, and you got it.
Igor is being way too polite with me. So, Igor, you're at Calian. What does Calian do in a nutshell?
We help the world communicate, innovate, lead healthy lives, and stay safe.
And how big is the company?
The company is huge. We've been around for 35 years, and right now we have just over 3,200 employees across Canada.
So you're a classic case of an employer who's got lots of employees across lots of locations, but with your tenure of over 30 years, you've really seen this whole space dramatically shift.
Absolutely. We offer a diverse offering in terms of healthcare, IT, training, and engineering. So we've seen the company involved and the recruitment team evolved with it.
And the space you're in, I would imagine there is lots of competition for coveted talent.
Absolutely. We all compete for the same talent.
So this whole thing, not only are you coming in as a subject matter expert, you are a consumer. You need to stay in the leading edge to make sure you win that prospective employee that you need to grow your business.
That is correct.
Awesome. Joining us, Steve Harding, the strategy leader from Xactly Design and Advertising, which I love this. This is the marketing side. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
the marketing side has changed dramatically, right? 5 years ago, we weren't talking about employers branding themselves for recruitment. Yet today, if you don't do that, you don't even enter the race. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not representing yourself or your interests online, then you're certainly missing the boat.
And it's even things like social channels and how you present yourself, because today's generation reacts very differently than, shall we say, previous generations. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not representing yourself, people are watching. So you got to make sure you know what you're doing online for your personal brand.
All right, you can check them out at xactlydesign.com. Myself, I mentioned I'm Darryl Praill. I'm with a firm called Talking Bluntly. And as you can see, I have no problem talking bluntly. Let's talk about today's agenda. All right, we're going to talk about employer branding techniques and strategies, followed by optimizing social channels for recruitment. I suspect Steve might have a thing or two to say about that. Digital marketing challenges I know we can all relate to, especially Igor. The challenge of multi-generational recruitment. I'm really looking forward to what James has to say on that one. Looking at him, obviously he spanned multiple generations already. And then how to use data to better understand audiences. So with that, let's get this party started. The first thing up is employer branding. Who should I throw this to, Steve or James? Who wants to kick this off?
Throw it straight to me. So,
James, over to you.
Compliments of it. So, when we were kind of sat around just talking about this before we started, and we were talking about the way that people interact just with everything they buy and they purchase now, right down from a hotel they go to. I mean, when I started in recruitment, we faxed resumes. People knew nothing about the business. Today, they can go on and, in their Glassdoor ratings, see how much people are paid, what people think of the CEO, what people think of each job. You have the job descriptions. You can even see the interview questions you may face before you even go into a company. So there's so much out there that's happening that we've got to get our hands around to actually brand ourselves effectively. So it's the same, it's the age-old marketing challenge. People will make up stories about your products, your services, your business, unless you tell them something different. So for me, I find it fascinating how we've shifted into almost this review culture where other people are telling you what to think of something. And I know it's causing companies to now think of recruitment as marketing and as part of their marketing function. I mean, we've got Calian here today, and you've got your colleague for marketing sat here as well, which just demonstrates that. So, I mean, maybe you can speak to the shift you've seen on that branding piece and why it's so important, guys.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. I think employee branding is so instrumental now in really developing, a strong online reputation. From really, it starts within the culture of your organization, straight through to all your employees. So whether it's showcasing, what it's like to work on the team that you're a part of, to the fun stuff you're doing on, as a group with your clients, I think it's essentially extremely important to showcase the positive side of the business with respects to the employees and how that really translate into the online brand.
So for you guys.
So I just want to point out one thing that I noticed. Like when we met today, this is the first time I've met all four of you guys. We did not exchange business cards.
It's true. So that means we don't want to exchange business cards with you. Or it means times have changed.
It's not personal.
I'll let you pick that one out.
Where I was going with this was really that, our business card was exchanged even before we met. And this happened on LinkedIn. It happened on social media. So that LinkedIn, your social media platform is your brand. So the odds are, just like we knew more about each other before we met, the candidates and the potential employees out there, they know more about company and the brand you represent before you even talk to them. And that is an important thing we need to consider as recruiters.
I'd be curious, when you're recruiting prospective employees, how often now does your brand come up in the conversation, feedback from them?
Well, we try to do it more subtly. So we're not selling brand. I think brand is just channeled through our recruiters. So for example, I'll give you an analogy. So the technology really allows, technology of social media allows for this virtual space to be used for communicating and sharing ideas. Recruiters and people, they paint this space in terms of with our corporate culture, with our corporate branding. And you do your job well if potential employees and the candidates pick up on this brand and they kind of relate to you.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, because I mean, we get brought in normally when there's a problem. So you think about how we're brought into situations, it's because, you know, you're making a change at the senior level. So things haven't worked out or they're looking to shift direction. And one of the things that we always find is a challenge coming in is when we have to start controlling the brand or changing the conversation around the brand because the business hasn't done something well enough on that side of things that the candidate pool or the marketplace is telling everybody else what they think of, you know, not necessarily Calian, but what an organization may be. And so, you know, we're constantly talking about different techniques and strategies, how you can start making gains if your brand isn't necessarily perceived strongly in the market. I'd love to kind of get your guys' perception on that and how you might even control some of that conversation.
Yeah, well, and I think from a branding perspective, it's you can control your narrative, right? So as an advertising agency or recruiter, you can voice internally and externally how you want people to perceive you, but your employees ultimately will be the ones who will do the talking. So I think from a social perspective, you've got to make sure that you're communicating the message that essentially you want people to understand about your company.
And there's a lot of things you need to do there. Like I know we're going to get it. The next slide will be how to optimize social channels specifically. But I'm watching a lot of employers these days intentionally create, for example, video content, a day in the life of, right? As an example, I'm seeing them take channels like Glassdoor significantly more serious now and intentionally making sure they're represented and represented well. Because a lot of the issues is that if you don't brand yourself correctly, is that you don't even realize that you're missing out on prospects because they've already bailed on you. They made a snap decision on your credibility. And I imagine, Steve, you've seen a dramatic change in the last several years where perhaps at your agency, people would have come to you before for certain demand generation campaigns or branding. Now you're seeing, the HR or the talent management or the recruitment people come to you saying, help us package ourselves up to be a destination as opposed to just another vendor.
Yeah, I think it's really what's the message that you want to convey. So if you're trying to target the right particular employee, what are those key characteristics that you're looking for within that person? I know for a lot within our group at Xactly, it's personality fit. So people can put on their resume their skills and qualifications, but the real test is how will their personality fit with the 20 other employees that we have. And that's a huge part to our growth and to us being successful is, everybody, has an education to a certain point, but it's, what is your personal brand and how does it tie into the corporate one? And I think that's really probably, Igor, I would say is your toughest challenge is making sure that, the skills are there, but it's the personality and how do they fit in?
3,400 people, that's a lot of personalities to fit into as well.
I completely agree, and you touched on a good point there. We've, as recruiters, we've moved beyond resumes. So the important point to talk about here is really that the latest generation of employees, it's a technology dominant world. These are the people who don't know time before internet, before smartphones. Everything is available to them right away. Everybody leaves a footprint on social media, and that is your brand. So in a way, it's almost just by reading a resume, it's almost too late. You have to kind of take that proactive approach where you approach a person that looks interesting to you, maybe starting off with a resume or their LinkedIn profile, and then you get to know them, before you have a position to offer to them, and you get to know what they're about, whether you have any common interests, whether they would be a good fit for your organization. And you start there, and it's the recruitment process has become much longer than it used to be. It used to start with an application to a job, leads to an interview, and whether depending how well they do an interview, it's a yeah or nay. But right now, I mean, the prospect of you hiring somebody starts much sooner, and the process lasts much longer.
But the conversation's changed as well. So, I mean, I think back, when I first started in recruitment, so I'm not as old as you, Darryl. So, but when I got into the business, we were faxing resumes to companies, and you were literally judging people on a piece of paper. But now I can literally sit down with somebody and know what they've done, where they've done it, who they've done it for, the type of work they've undertaken, the likely challenges they've faced. So we find the conversations are much more personal than they used to be. So you're actually talking about the person and the individual much more so than we did before. And so to your point, I think we end up almost trying to work out, can this be somebody that we can not necessarily be friends with, but really be comfortable working with day in, day out, which is what it's almost like a feeling out process, a dating process with a potential applicant before they even get in the door with us. So it's, for me, the conversation's changing as well.
Yeah. Sorry, James, what's a fax? I don't know what a fax is. Before my time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was going to say it's funny to think how whether you're looking at changing jobs and moving into another career, people still lead with their resume for the most part, but they want to sell themselves in person. So they hope to get that face-to-face, however they're looking to connect, whether it's LinkedIn or other social media avenues or a phone call. Ultimately, your goal is to get that face-to-face. And we often see resumes or applications come through us, and before we even want to respond, we can have a good idea of what their fit is like, how creative they may be, and us being in the creative world, we're looking at a creative resume, right? We don't necessarily need to see everything that's on the paper, but how it's displayed. Is there spelling errors? Does it look to be creative? Are there colors on it? I think a lot of people, and we're actually in the process right now, for any of those listening, we're looking for, here's a little plug, we're looking for a content strategist.
A great headhunting
to join. Yeah, so maybe you guys can help me out.
Can help you out.
Really? Let me know for sure. I'm definitely looking for some good groups. But that being said, I'm shocked at the amount of people who are applying and actually not taking into account how important their brand is before they make contact with us.
And it goes both ways, employers too. Like, I'd be curious, if I were to say to you, Igor, as it relates to Calian, you as a recruiter, do you know who your competitors are? I know it's a loaded question. The answer, I'm assuming, is yes.
Yes.
All right. Do you know the brand image they project on their company page, on their social channels, and how it compares and contrasts to the brand image you project?
I like to think that my team considers that part of their job. So not only are you looking at the employee and candidate space out there, but you're also looking at the competition as well, because it's a fastly evolving world out there in terms of recruitment, in terms of candidates. Everybody moves quickly, so you need to move with it. You cannot be complacency is kind of an enemy here. If you are online, you have to move with the flow. You have to be part of the conversation. I don't want to get negative here at all, but like sometimes, and I'm guilty of it.
Please, go ahead, get negative.
You'll see something interesting and you'll just reshare it. Well, all of a sudden you see everybody resharing it. But if you're going to leave your fingerprint on it, your footprint, like contribute something.
Add value
to it. And that way you're not just cluttering people's social media space. You're actually contributing.
There's a classic formula that I follow all the time. I heard this. It's not mine or somebody else. It's the PVC formula. PVC meaning you take the content, you personalize it, then you add value, and then you have a call to action. All right. And every marketer would love that one, right? But I'm sorry, you look, James, like you want to say something.
No, I'm intrigued as to, is keeping that content and that conversation going. We're talking about social channels and everything else and that modernization. So it's gone beyond just having a job board then and saying, here you go, here's the 10 things we're looking to hire. It's more about, this is who we are, this is what we're about, this is what we're doing, this is why you should talk to us. So it's a huge undertaking. You're almost creating a community or a talent community space where people can go and check you out, walk in, look in the shop windows before they even engage in the conversation about coming to work for you.
Right, and you mentioned a key word here. So the candidates are really shopping out there.
That's right. Yeah.
They're looking at all the companies. The little things that did not matter in the past, like a title, all of a sudden does matter right now. Depending on the generation, a certain title may appeal to somebody better than the other.
A strategist, for example.
A strategist. What's a strategist, right? So some generations may not.
Strategy is a great word.
So that's an easy 10K a year bump. It's a strategist. It's in there, man. I'd be curious, before we move on to the next slide, I'm just watching the clock here a little bit. We talk a little bit on this slide here as an employer about humanizing the recruitment team members. Igor, you mentioned your team members, right? And building a trust through a personalized approach. Can you speak a little bit about how you and your team humanize your engagement with prospective employees and how you build that trust?
So what I try to do through my team is really we're trying to make this frictionless and painless experience for candidates. So we create experience for candidates. At no point in the recruitment cycle, so from the time we speak to them, whether we have a position for them or whether it's proactive, until they get the job, should they feel like they don't know where they stand. I think that's one thing that we can easily do by talking to candidates and just make them feel like they're not a commodity. So we're stepping away from, templated job orders. We're stepping away from, mass spamming emails. We have a job description, the job for you, do you know anybody? That's the whole quantity thing is a step of the past. Right now, we're carefully selecting a few quality candidates and then leveraging them and their networks to help us find the right person.
Just sharing a story, because one of the bullets here is utilizing a proactive approach. My youngest child right now is trying to develop their career, and it was an interesting experience that they proactively shared with me. They had applied to this prospective employer who was advertising online, right? And they were so impressed. They came to me and they said, the process was very proactive. When I submitted it, I got an acknowledgement that your resume has been received. And then I got a notification that my move forward today, my resume was now being reviewed, and they could log in and they could see that. And they were so impressed by that as a prospective employer, because it was like, if the answer is no, I don't qualify, I'm cool. But the fact that you did this and you just communicated with me, even though I'm not talking to a real human, blew them away. And they were like, wow, now I really want to work for this employer. And that just happened this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the most kind of soul-destroying experiences when you're looking for a job and you're sending resumes and getting nothing. So when we take ownership of that on the recruitment side and say, what is the experience of the person? I mean, we use the word concierge level service. If we're talking to 200 people for a search, there's 199 people who are going to be disappointed. So it's incumbent on us to find a way to give them the information so they can move forward and help them go. But for us, we see it as a marketing challenge primarily. It's, how do you build people into these marketing funnels, get the communication going? Because we're still talking about a large pool of people. Mm-hmm. We actually even hired a marketing person in-house. We've got Kelsey here as well. So we've got two people on the marketing side internally who are a large proportion of their job is actually talking to the candidate community. And it's, we're leaning on marketing a lot at the moment, Steve, and I don't know if you're seeing the same from other companies as well when it comes to their recruitment career side of their business.
Just a question on who you hire internally. Are you sure they can manage the responsibilities needed?
I hope so.
Okay.
But if not, I know who to call.
All right, perfect. No. Yeah, and to be honest, on your point with respects to the branding piece of being proactive, that's part of your employer brand as well. Right. So, and I know we're going back one minute here, but the reality is if you don't respond and be proactive, people may have this negative, or may come to a negative conclusion about, how your community or how your company communicates. So do you want them to explain the poor process that they went through? They're going to be disappointed they didn't get the job to begin with, but if you didn't communicate it to them clearly, it's affecting their online reputation. So that's part of your brand, right? So regardless of whether they're a qualified candidate or not, or want to go through that process, I think it's really important to make sure that your communication process is proactive, and that regardless of whether they're a fit or not, that they know what it's like, because then they can walk away and still be a brand ambassador.
And what's interesting about that is that, most HR, talent management, recruitment experts, they know that intrinsically, mm-hmm. but they don't prioritize it. They know they need to do it, but they never get around to doing it, which is probably a good segue to this conversation on optimizing social channels for recruitment. Because I know, Igor, you said, it used to be paper, now it's LinkedIn, as one of the things you said. So let's throw it out there. What are some of the mistakes we see happening often, and what are some of the opportunities to stand out from the crowd?
So I'll just start with saying that social media, I'll just repeat what I said earlier, is a space to really be social and exchange ideas. What we often forget, it's almost actually easier to say not to tell people what not to do with social media than it is teach somebody how to use it properly, because it's so individualized. I think one of the things we need to keep in mind when using social media is that it's a piece of technology It's a tool, it's not a solution. So you really know how to use it as another tool in your repertoire of tools. One thing you need to keep in mind is in the end, candidates want to know who stands behind this transaction. So you can automate at the beginning. You can use technology at various pieces of recruitment cycle. But in the end, you really need to introduce somebody who's standing behind this company, who's delivering this brand. So I think the human connectedness and this empathy piece is still something that's really important when it comes to your social media interaction with candidates.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And it was interesting, even for ourselves, we found, we launched the business 3.5 years ago. We talked about the company to start with a lot of the time, but now we talk more about the people within our company. Because again, it's a person-to-person discussion that's going to take place. If you look at our social channels, it's talking about Kyle, talking about Kelsey, it's talking about Matt, Candice, what they do and how they do it. Because at the end of the day, people will buy from people. They're buying an opportunity. They're buying the opportunity to have a conversation with you. We've really shifted away from talking about Keynote a lot of the time and talking just about the people who work at Keynote. And we're having a far greater engagement now on our platform because people go look at what Kelsey's about, why she's working here, what her background is. They still go look at our website. So the destination is still our website. It's still the opportunities pages, the companies we're working with. But it's about the people more so. So it's a really interesting shift that we've found recently on our social side.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Igor.
I was going to say it's almost a part of our human psychology. Like people do not trust companies. They do not trust brands, right? I think what we need to know on the corporate side is we need to leverage our employees to channel our brand through them.
Well, that's what personalizes it. And you're both saying that, James and Igor, is that when you feature Kelsey, it's personal, even though we all know Kelsey works for Keynote.
Yeah.
Right? And we can all make that leap. And the reality is that, to your point, if I'm being recruited and I have multiple offers, a big part of my decision-making process is just who do I connect and trust the most? If I have Calian and I have a similar, not saying anybody could be similar to Calian, but theoretically, a similarly comparable, capable other employee, prospective employer. Now it comes down to just human bias. Who do I like better? Dealing with Igor was great. I trust him. I don't think he's going to steer me wrong. All right. And so therefore, that's where I'm going to go. And when you're spending the money, you're spending to not only invest in the recruitment process, but knowing that the candidates you hire have a direct impact on your success. That's a small investment to make that so many people don't make. On the flip side, though, going back full circle, that's the opportunity for other vendors who are trying to compete. And what's interesting about that is I often see a lot of upstart companies leveraging that to compete against the big boys. And I'd be curious, Steve, if you kind of see that with some of your clients, we have, new people, new kids on the street, new kids in the block, and they just take a fresh approach and they reap the benefits from it.
Yeah, for sure. To touch on the employee side, I think it's utilizing the employees you have as brand ambassadors. If they're current employees and they're loving the experience, then you want to be proactive and you want to use them as, standing from the ivory tower and also promote the opportunities you have. I think video comes into a big part of this now, right? Especially with the younger generations. We're talking about getting away from resumes, but what about video resumes? And people are really using social channels to communicate their brand, but also, communicate their interests and where they may want to go in a career. So, every social media channel has a different audience. So you got to know how to speak to that audience. But I certainly think if you're trying to optimize it for recruitment, you really got to leverage your staff. Really, your staff are those ambassadors. And, you can't force staff. Not everybody, is on social media, but, we're over 30 million people here in Canada, and, approximately 22 million of Canadians have one social media account. So there's a really good chance that your huge employee base is on social media. So if they're not promoting the positions that you have, then I think you're certainly not reaching the audience that is really viable out there for you.
So let me throw a completely loaded question out there. And I warned these poor gentlemen before we started that I wouldn't set them up for failure. And I want to throw a loaded question out there. How important is it to employers, so I guess I'll look at Steve and Igor here, both prospective employers, or for recruiters, James, if you will, in this capability, that you hire staff who, for your own recruitment team, who are social media savvy, not just they have a LinkedIn account, like they're savvy. They know how to leverage Instagram, LinkedIn, content, video. They know how to have conversations. How critical, how important, how heavily weighted is that in the process?
In my view, it's really important. So I consider my staff as the frontline salespeople. Even though we're not salespeople, we sell, like Steve says, we're brand ambassadors. When candidates talk to us, they are actually making an opinion about Calian based on the conversation and experience they're having with us. And I'm just going to extrapolate a little bit. So it used to be candidates were brainwashed into write a resume. It has to be one page. It has to be, certain whiteness of the paper, certain thickness of the paper. You hand deliver it, cover letter, all of those things. And same thing with in terms of recruitment. It used to be that you were giving strict corporate guidelines, what you can say on social media. If you had access to social media, you used to be run by a communications department if you had one. And now the things has completely changed. A lot of times you don't even get a resume. You just get a note from LinkedIn saying, I want to talk to you about this job I saw. You get a text message. So does the whole spelling thing matter anymore? If you see a spelling on a resume, you throw it in the garbage. It certainly does, because it tells you a little more about certain characteristics and competencies about a person, but you give him another chance. You don't just throw it into the garbage. Recruiters are breaking barriers. They're not following traditional guidelines. I encourage my team to be creative online, to be creative when using their social media. We have this thing, it's called the hashtag Life at Calian. And this is a huge hit with candidates, because not only are we telling them about the position, but we're telling them potentially about our workplace, about the things we do on Fridays, what our typical afternoons like, what the team is all about. They're looking for a fit, we're looking for a fit. So they're interviewing us and we're interviewing them.
Yeah, so I'm just looking up that hashtag.
Yeah, seeing something good on there. So if it is on Friday, I'm just work out when it's been Canada.
Everybody online right now is looking up that hashtag.
But no, you make a fair point, because I remember when social really started to push LinkedIn, it used to be you used to have the company owned your LinkedIn account, or if you're going to link yourself on your Facebook to your company account. Today, I fully expect that every single person on my team is fully integrated into every social network. We are trying to find a common ground or a common denominator between us and potential candidates so we can have a real conversation. It's not because we both work for a similar type of companies, because we've got some common interests. And we had a chap who used to work for the Canadian military, and he's an intelligence specialist, and the amount of intelligence he can garner from people's online profiles. So he feels like he knows you the first time he has a conversation with you. But if they're not social media savvy, they need to have the desire and the willingness to do it quickly. We're not talking about rocket science here. We're talking about talking to people. You just, rather than doing it face to face, you're having an online conversation, and it's nothing more than a conversation. But I would be shocked if anyone's working in recruitment and being successful right now who isn't leveraging social channels effectively.
So if you're listening to this, either as an employer or as a recruiter, and we're talking about something that makes you uncomfortable, you're at the right webinar. So there we go. All right. So the biggest challenge often with doing this is the fact that it's all about scale, right? We can't respond to all these applicants all the time. And especially people are just kicking the tires and seeing what's going on. And it ranges in a whole variety of, university and college grads to senior execs. It's a lot. How do we scale? I mean, there's a lot of new innovation going on. Artificial intelligence chat tools. Of course, the challenge with that, as the slide speaks to, is, well, how authentic is that? And is that truly more efficient? So let's talk a little bit about the tools that are available to us today that we may or may not be using. I know, James, you've got a lot of experience here and a lot of success and a lot of lessons learned. Let me throw it to you.
Yeah, I mean, the tools they're coming on leaps and bounds. I mean, the way we can just determine who we're going to talk to first and foremost based on their online presence is far more sophisticated than it used to be. We can predict someone's personality. We can predict, whether they're going to be interested in making a change. We can even get into the point now where we predict what the next job they're going to do is. So we're able to map people's career trajectory and say, we know that this person's currently at this level, so they're likely to step up to this level next with this type of company. So we're already more informed going into these discussions. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it still has to end with a person-to-person discussion. And that's the part where, we talked about chatbots before. You and I have had this conversation. They are very stale. There's very little in the way of kind of humanization behind them yet. So as a frontline first qualifier, I still like the idea of being able to have somebody on my careers page when they've looked at who we are, life at Calian, they've looked at, Pizza Fridays. What else is on there, Steve? Did you find anything good?
No, I can't talk about it.
Okay, can't talk about it. So go yourself, check it out. But all of those fun things in Calian, it's still, did you see what we were doing last Thursday for that charitable cause? A chatbot can maybe engage in that initial conversation. And for me, I think that's good because people aren't ready to make the full commitment yet to say, I need to sit down and talk to Igor. But if they can get 2 or 3 more tidbits of information that the AI is allowing us to kind of really work through, I think that's where chatbots could be really powerful. And we see it on like news, we see it on car websites, and we see it on hotel websites where you're checking out the hotel. Oh, by the way, do you know there's a kids club? Do you have kids? Or have you checked out our Michelin star restaurant? You should try this one out. So I know you probably play with chatbots a little bit, or at least some of those AI tools, Steve.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's dependent on where you're putting them, especially on your website, right? You talked about a careers page. You talked about maybe the homepage. We essentially will provide suggestions for our clients to use a variety of different tools. I know Facebook Messenger is a big one. Just having people, whether it's for recruitment or whether it's for product information, having those tools accessible to provide real-time responses, I think are important for that whole process of improving that customer or potential employee's journey.
How good are they in your opinion right now?
It's a tough question because I think it really depends on for our group specifically, they're not a key. We're not using those tools. Maybe on a day-to-day from a brand perspective, we are people commenting on our posts and whatnot. But from a recruitment perspective, these aren't tools that we were using for our business. But I would say for the most part, for the clients of ours that use them, they are very effective in trying to continue the conversation and at least evoke more interest.
I find chatbots are good for doing that initial filtering. Right? Yeah. So you kind of get there. You can have some scripted conversations that determine, kind of role they're looking at, development, marketing, sales, what have you. What kind of some of their skills are, especially, you're saying you get a text message, right? It's no different than I get a chat message. Hey, I'm interested in your job. The robot or the bot messages can go on and say, what's your education of your education level, university, whatever, how many years experience do you have in these capacities? And then they can route it to a real person to take over the conversation. The downside to the chatbots is that often many people are not monitoring them. So what happens is that the chatbot actually is very efficient, does its job, and then it just goes silent. And I'm waiting 5 minutes for Susie in recruitment or Susie in sales to respond, and Susie's never answers for whatever reason, because Susie's on lunch break and forgot to say, I'm going on lunch break. Yeah. So the bot doesn't know any better. So a lot of it is, for bots to work, you have to identify your processes and make sure your staff are staffing that bot accordingly.
Yeah, and Darryl, I think you bring up a good point, surprisingly. All kidding aside, is that you need to make sure that the communication strategy is aligned with the client, the respective client using it, because you're right, a lot of the chatbots, they don't know the intricate details of what questions or the answers to the questions, so they need to go out and say, grab contact information and follow up, saying a representative will be in touch to further answer your questions. The other thing is we also notice some of our clients don't want to be that available, so they also want to, they have a recruitment strategy, they have a process on their own. They don't want people reaching out asking, hey, I submitted my application. Hey, what's the follow-up process? So some of them, have an idea of how they want to handle their recruitment strategy and don't want to be as accessible.
But that's part of the whole issue anyway with the social recruitment and social channels, and when using these digital marketing tools, is it has to be a two-way street. And you're saying we want to find as many ways to connect with you as possible, but the reverse is you need to do the same thing. And we often see a lot of the recruitment challenges with companies is because they simply don't respond. And so somebody is having a bad day, they didn't hear from Igor, so they go on to Glassdoor or Yelp, or is Yelp even a thing anymore?
More in America.
Okay, but fair enough. Or Google reviews, and they say 1-star review, never heard back from them. Suddenly you've got an entire brand image you've got to deal with. So there are, for me, intrinsic challenges with these tools because they are two-way streets, to your point. So
yeah. Plus the question, I think, is what's a respectful response time? right? Is it within the hours, within 12 hours, 24 hours, 3 days, right? And I think you're leaving yourself, open to criticism if the respective person doesn't feel you get back to them in the right amount of time. So generally there's messages, we'll get back to you within 24 hours or whatnot. But I think there's, certain expectations that you got to realize if you're going to, use these tools, how effective will they be in that communication?
It's important to set the right expectation. So when recruiters speak to people, at the end they close off the conversation, setting the expectation when they're going to speak next, when they're going to hear from them, and what the next step in the process will be, or in the cycle. Same thing can happen with AI and chat boxes. I mean, you can easily just put in a script and program it to say when, where they like. It just relates back to my previous point. A candidate should never feel like they don't know where they are in the process.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Will the candidate be disappointed, or will they think negatively if they're speaking to a chatbot rather than a person, or will they feel, to your point about one of your kids who felt, I got to see, even though it was automated technology, I felt like I knew what was going on. Is that more positive than a human conversation, or would they take that as an alternative? I don't know.
I think you're hitting right on the next slide, the whole multi-generational aspect, which I suspect, my youngest child, no problem with that, right? I got a communication. Yeah, I wasn't a real person, but at least I know what's going on. Whereas perhaps somebody of James' advanced age would look at that and say, I want to talk to somebody real because my hearing aid needs a new battery. I don't know. But, I do think there's a multi-generational problem with that. What are the challenges you have putting a program in place? Because we've done all this talking about social media and LinkedIn, but we all in this room know that not everybody has the same comfort level on social media at all.
Yeah, we have certain roles that we did a CMO search recently for a company. Easiest thing in the world to do for us because everybody in marketing was online.
Yeah.
We're doing a CFO search for another organization right now, and they're doing their very best to hide away from everybody out there so getting hold of them is difficult. They're not engaging on the social channels, so we're having to look at, these are experienced professionals, 25 years into their career, who are going to change the fate of an organization from finance. We can't reach them on social channels. So we're already seeing that we have to try 4 or 5 different things to get the same message out. So email, text message, phone call, fax machine for somebody of your vintage there, Darryl. And also making sure we ping them with a DM on Instagram, making sure we're
Bat signal.
But you joke. I mean, we were laughing. We were talking about how sophisticated we are, and we're like, well, surely we probably have to post an ad for this one because no one's replying. So
it's true.
Let's stick an advert in the Ottawa Citizen, and suddenly realizing there are certain roles, certain profiles of people you want to reach, that you have to look at some traditional strategies alongside these more modern and fresh approaches.
I think what often gets overlooked is, in all honesty, is the secondary audience. So each social platform, from recruitment or even just in general, whether it's Facebook, whether it's any of the platforms out there, is you have an intended primary audience in which you want to communicate to, but don't forget about that secondary audience that can also spread your message, right? And they're very influential. So is it friends of friends, family, parents, other employees who work for them? If you're boosting a Facebook campaign for recruitment, don't ignore that secondary audience, because they are very influential and they'll help reach out. Maybe they know so and so who is looking for a change in their career and they're a CFO, right? But they're not online, and they'll hear about it that way.
I wish it was simple. I wish there was one.
Neither of us would be employed.
I wish there was a silver bullet. Yeah. So not only are we dealing with multi-generational audience, we're also dealing with generations that overlap each other. So you really have to know what your audience is. And on the flip side, I'll introduce another thought. You need to know who's communicating with them. So not only do you have to know the audience, you also need to know the strengths of your recruitment team and how to leverage these strengths. So who's going to talk to who here? Who's going to sell your brand best? The person you think you know best.
That's a pretty interesting point, right? Because you can do that, going back to the video as an example, right? If I'm recruiting for a senior role, maybe it's a senior finance role, to your point, James, right? Then maybe if I have, I don't know, a shareholder, or if you're a publicly held company, a financial analyst, or somebody else speaking to the merits of the company, right? That's going to resonate with me a lot more than somebody on the recruitment team, as much as I'm sure they're awesome, Igor. It's the idea of a peer, a colleague, who I'm going to trust more. So I need to be able to have messaging and branding and credibility that differs. Like, for example, somebody of my vintage, I'll just fall on the sword and say I'm old, may not even think to go to Glassdoor. I know many of my colleagues are like, what's Glassdoor? Don't know it, right? So they're going to trust, they're going to do the old-fashioned way, whereas I know at a younger generation, it's going to be, they may not go to Glassdoor either. It may just be their buddy Susie or their buddy Sam said that Calian's a great place to work. You should go work there. And that's good enough for them, social proof, right?
So we at Calian cover truly a multi-generational candidate base. So due to our diverse offering, which covers some of the most remote areas in Canada, sometimes you're really dealing with candidates who have no camera cell phones, who have no internet, who are not, I mean, they don't have they may have an email address, which is still, Yahoo or something, right?
Or check it once every 3 or 4 days, kind of.
Or
thing.
never.
Yeah,
or
never,
it's an email address that's kind of a family email address, so you don't even know who you're talking to at one point. And then we also dealing with people who are from more recent generations or somebody who live in urban centers. So you really need to know what makes them tick. Sometimes if you do not match the recruiter with the audience, you get little surprises. For example, baby boomers, or the generation that I belong to, we used to taught in school how to go to an interview, what to dress, what to ask, what not to ask. Right now, there is no rules like that. First thing you may get asked is, hey, can I work flex time hours? Or can I take every second Friday off? What's the salary of the guy working next to me? And some of these things that used to be red flags are not red flags anymore. You just really need to know who your audience is and how to address it.
So for me, because I love this conversation, we keep having it internally. Is it generational focus for who we're speaking to? But so we actually hired a psychologist earlier this year. So we added an industrial psychologist to our team. So we've started thinking, should we actually try and match the job profile to a psychological profile of someone on our team so that they've got a better way to resonate? So somebody who thinks like an accountant, somebody who thinks like an engineer or a healthcare specialist. So we've started looking at predictive psychology tools so we can actually look at the likely profile of someone, predict what their DISC profile is, a nice simple psychology tool, and then look on our team and say who's most like that or who will resonate most with that, so get their trust to have a better conversation. So we're trying to look at it. Is it a psychology issue? Is it a generational issue? Is it a specialism of technical skills? I don't know the answer, but we're having a lot of fun kind of playing with that to see who is the right way to match up on a job. So we're playing with the psychology side on that right now.
What I like about that conversation, and I point this out to Steve because I know he'll relate to this with his agency and the marketing side, is the classic marketing thing is, identify the personas of the people you're trying to target, right? Or in most cases, you're trying to sell to. In this case, we're not trying to sell a product or a service. We're trying to sell our corporate brand to prospective employees. So if you know those personas, whether they're, baby boomers, Gen X, millennial, what have you, and you know that their communication bias is finance versus marketing, then that you can put processes and technology and language in place to increase your likelihood of success. And you're playing percentages at that point in time, but sometimes that's how you get the candidate versus not. Yeah. Let's move on to the big part around data, using data to better understand audiences. And I know, James, this is something near and dear to your heart. What are some of the ways you're seeing people use data to better understand those audiences or those personas?
Well, it depends on the type of the company. So small companies, it's still tricky because you're working with such a small sample size. But we were recently in with a large organization who are starting to predict the turnover for their year based on career trajectory, average tenure, engagement scores from their reviews, and actually mapping all of that data to say, we believe there's an 80% chance we're going to have 3 vacancies in this team. So then doing proactive recruitment to build talent pools around roles that they think may come up. Because one of the biggest challenges we find, and Canada is wonderful at this, it has a 2-week notice period. I come from England. It's the accent, so thank you.
Sorry,
Steve.
Where did you come from?
Just north of, just England, just outside the valley here.
Okay.
And
I thought that was Orleans.
It was just the Orleans twang that's really coming
through. A bit
through.
of a hoser accent going on. That's inside, yeah.
But we have a 4-week notice period. So an average recruitment cycle is 6 to 8 weeks. So 4 weeks was always bad enough. You're already going to lose 2 to 4 weeks of productivity. But in Canada, you're normally losing 6 to 8 weeks whenever somebody resigns. So if you can start saying, well, we're going to predict which people are going to leave our business and when, we can start filling some of the gaps before we even need to hire. But we have one client that offers jobs to people when they don't even have roles and responsibility because they know there's a damn good chance they're going to need a new salesperson in the next 3 months. So they offer them a job, they find the people, and they say, you're starting August 1st. So they put really long note kind of start dates, kind of extend their start dates by 3-4 months just because they've identified the next person they're going to hire before a vacancy even comes up.
That's crazy. I love that, but that's crazy.
But that's using data to start saying we know every year we're going to lose a proportion of our team. If that's 10% turnover, 5% turnover, if we know with an 80% certainty who that's going to be, why wait till they quit?
Mm-hmm.
So are you actually meeting with prospective candidates even though you don't have a job available? So do you not feel that to a certain point, the potential employee, they know they're going for a job interview, but then you telling them, well, we don't have a job available right at this point. Are you losing trust in your brand? And
because the conversation is not as black and white as that. The conversation, hey, look, we're looking to expand our business. We know there's a couple of key areas we're looking to complement over the course of the next year.
Okay.
We've seen your profile. We love what you've done. We think you're the type of person that would thrive in our environment. Would you be open to sit down a coffee conversation with me? I just want to find out more about you. Who are you? What are you about? That conversation leads to a second, a third. So, you know what? Igor, if the opportunity came up, I know Kevin Ford's a great guy, but you love the sign on the wall here in our basement office that we're in today. And, would you ever be interested in coming to work at Keynote? And the answer is, well, of course, James. I think you're fantastic. We've had that conversation. The next step is, well, I now know there's a gap. Sorry, your colleague's waving at me saying, no chance.
I just can't believe you had that conversation where someone said you were great. I don't.
Kevin, if you're listening, they have a fridge full of beer in their basement.
But the reality is the type of conversations have changed. It's still a branding, it's still a marketing call, but I'm being proactive to say, I know I've got a gap now. And that gap might actually just be we're growing, so I need to proactively fill the funnel. I know the next two people I'm going to hire as a business. If they know it yet or not.
It's funny you say that, only because a personal story happened to me a few months back where I was speaking at a local networking event, and there was a lot of people there. Specifically in this story, there was a local CEO of a very well-funded tech company. No big deal. Mm-hmm. Apparently, they liked what I said, and they came to me afterwards and they said, would you mind, and I loved what you said, we could love your ideas. Would you mind meeting with me and my exec team? Just we want to show your product and bounce some ideas off you. I'm like, sure. And we go there and wonderful time. And then he shares to me, I'm looking to hire my next CMO within 12 to 18 months. And I want to carry on this conversation. That freaked me out, not in a bad way. Just I've never had somebody come to me who's saying, I don't have a position yet, but I know my next hire, I know my timeline, and I'd like to keep this conversation going. And I thought that was brilliant. Yep. Now, clearly his judgment about me was questionable, but that was brilliant. Are you using big data at all, interestingly, in different ways at Calian?
So we are. I've been with Calian. Yeah. No, absolutely, I can share. I mean, big data has been around for a long time. We just never used it. I think now we're finally learning how to use it. And some of the biggest jobs and most attractive jobs right now are the data analysts. So I've been with Calian for 10 years, and Calian recruitment team has evolved and morphed many times thanks to data analysis and tracking. Every company has their different approach. Some separate the sourcing and the recruitment function. Some outsource the recruiting altogether. Some rely more on technology. Some strictly stick to the human factor. And really, there isn't a right or wrong answer here. It really just depends on you doing your homework, analyzing the data and the feedback you get from the candidates and your success, and just finding the right formula. So right now, where we are is at Calian, we're using a balanced recruitment cycle strategy. So we use a balance of technology to automate pieces of our recruitment cycle, but ultimately, like we mentioned earlier and agreed that it comes down to a personal touch. We know exactly, depending on our need, what needs to be automated. So if we need something done fairly quickly, and this is a role that we're going to get 300 applicants, we're going to use some of the technology just to do the sourcing quickly and then hand it over to a recruiter who's going to introduce the company to this individual. We have 3 different recruiting teams, handling their their individual service lines, and each team is very different. They all use different tools, and they have different approaches when it comes to recruitment. And this is all based on analyzing their day-to-day data.
All right, I'm going to segue us into the Q&A. just respecting people's calendars. We have a handful of questions that are already up. If you have a question, we'd love to hear from you. Simply go on Twitter and submit it that way. Or, again, the more popular way is just using the control panel. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you're on a phone or a tablet, you should see it right there. Also, it just says questions. Type away. We'll get it. We'll ask our panelists. In no particular order, these have kind of come in here. Question, how do you determine what the culture is within your own company? That's a very interesting, loaded question. There's lots of pauses right now. People are smiling in the room.
They're staring at me, though.
They're staring at each other. They're all staring at Steve, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. It's got to start from the top ultimately. So, the founder or CEO or president or owner of the company must establish what they're, I think, really what they're looking to achieve in their business offering. So, with our studio, we're looking to provide, great looking and creative advertising campaigns, graphic design, websites to help make our clients more successful. So, and improve their online reputation. So, in order for us, we need to make sure that we're finding creative, outgoing, individuals that are really team players in order to align with that vision of creating great, outstanding work that improves our clients. But I think it essentially needs to, that's a loaded question for sure, and we could speak for an hour on branding your corporate team. But yeah, absolutely. But it's a great question, and I certainly think it's got to align with what your business objective is.
So for me, it starts with asking people, why do you even work here? So I love asking the question, why do you come to work every day? Why do you come here? So what are those core connections to your values? Like, we have our effing values, and our values are we believe are what are important to us, but the culture is then, why do you do what you do? Because I'm a fundamental believer that people care about two things: what they do that matters to somebody, and someone really gives a damn. Those are the two real core drivers. So for me, I want to show that I give a damn, and then I want to know that they truly believe what they do matters. So that for us drives a lot of our culture conversations. Igor, you've got a far bigger company than what I have to deal with here. It's a large team you're dealing with.
So in my perspective, it does come to this core purpose. What I mentioned earlier, Calian will help the world communicate, innovate, lead healthy lives, and stay safe. So this is our corporate culture. We also believe in growth, and we believe in work-life balance. However, within a company like Calian, we have these microcultures. So my team is known for a particular culture. We may be loud. We may have fun every once in a while. We have, a couple of Nerf guns lying around our cubicles, and we have a lot of fun. Another manager, we may rely on other tools to engage their teams. Not as fun. We are the funnest, and we're the most obnoxious in the building.
I can see the applicant now. How good is your Nerf skills?
Go to the left, go to the right. Yeah.
But really, part of the culture I like to instill in my team is, I'm an enabler here. They're the experts. They're the brand ambassadors. They talk to candidates. They let me know what they need and what they need to get the job done, and I just try to give them that.
All right. 1 minute. Fast and furious. How do you target talented candidates who are not actively looking for a different job without poaching? Now, my question is poaching a bad thing? But,
no. We're competing for talent. So, 96% of people in Ottawa are employed. So the first thing you've got to realize is that you are always poaching talent. There's a very small proportion of people who are looking for work at any one time. Your job as a business is to put the best team out every single day that can allow you to succeed and grow. So the first mindset shift has to be, you have to be looking for talent. You've got to make sure your business is winning and succeeding, and that does mean you're going to be cherry picking people from elsewhere. So I'm a headhunter. I believe that poaching and headhunting is actually a good thing, and people are going to make their own choice. And today's culture and today's world, they have the ability to see the choices in front of them. So I'm gonna go with you should poach.
All right. With that, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you're watching this on demand, you can reach James or Igor or Steve or myself at the email you see beneath every single speaker's picture. We hope you enjoyed today's content. This will be made available on the website. Stay tuned. Whatever email address you use to sign up for this webinar, you will get a copy of it imminently. We encourage you, share that link with your colleagues. Put it online on LinkedIn and let them know that you're available to either recruit or be recruited. So that's, use this for your own purposes. In the meantime, if you're looking for great recruitment skills, reach out to James. If you need good marketing services, design, branding, demand generation, Steve's your man. And of course, Calian, big R's company, lots of skills. Reach out to them. Igor would love to hear from you. My name is Darryl Praill, folks. I've had lots of fun managing this motley collection of characters today, and I hope that you got value out of this. We hope to see you next time right here. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.